All right.
Yeah.
So, let's get going here. We talked the past 2 weeks about the mitzvah of Milah. I want to do one more week on the mitzvah of Milah. We could go for like probably 10 weeks on it, but don't drag it out too much. But there's some geschmack and stuff still left to talk about. I figure by next week we'll go up to the next mitzvah. Gedana shall be appropriate next week's parsha. Vayishlach. But for now, we'll do one more week of Milah. Shmuel, you remember the shiur from the stadium?
No. Sports betting mother.
Huh?
Sports betting mother.
Sports betting mother. Okay.
I also remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was the other thing we discussed. No, it wasn't a shiur. We just discussed the other thing. I followed up on something that we've been discussing about. I mentioned a shiloh that the Gemara darshans that Esav is excluded from Milah because we darshan ki Yitzchak v'lo chazer v'lo kol Yitzchak. Be Yitzchak v'lo kol Yitzchak, only partial Yitzchak. So the Gemara darshans from that there's only Milah to only half of Yitzchak's children. So Shiloh is now just asking, so like when did that kick in? Yitzchak presumably did Milah to Esav. I mean, he was the son that he loved. So presumably if he did Milah, so when did this concept that Esav is now, when his children are cut off, like when exactly did that kick in? We discussed a possibility that maybe there's some medrash that Yitzchak was Ner L'Mol, but that apparently is fake news. There's no, that Esav is Ner L'Mol, sorry, that's fake news. There's no Esav Ner L'Mol, is not listed anywhere. He's not one of the people that are listed. But I did find
Yitzchak did Milah on him doesn't mean that he had to do Milah on him.
And that could be the answer. It could be he did it and then only found out later that he did. I was just wondering, like, what was the status of it? Was it a mitzvah Milah? Let's say it happened to be his Milah fellow on Shabbos. Would you still be able to do it? The Yaakov and Esav, you find some medrash somewhere, make a cheshbon. Yaakov and Esav were born on Shabbos. Let's just say theory. Talking in theoretical. What?
Did he make a bracha?
Right. Did he make a bracha on the Milah? How much did he know about it? So saying, I found the Lamaisa fascinating machlekes and midrashim, that it seems to be machlekes and midrashim. The medrash we have in Medrash Rabbah says that Yaakov he said when Dinah ended up with Shem, the medrash says you didn't want Dinah, you hid her for Esav, you didn't want Dinah to marry someone who had a bris milah, so now she's going to end up marrying Shem who didn't have a bris milah. Clearly in the medrash Esav had a bris milah, right? It's calling him a mol. There's a ton of Be'elio that says that Yitzchak, Esav and his children did Milah until Yitzchak died. Once Yitzchak died, then they took it themselves, they said, forget about it, we're no longer doing this, we're no longer involved in this, we are out. However, Me'idach Yisa, there's a Dasakenu Balatoisvis that brings a medrash, and it says the medrash says that Yitzchak came on the 8th day to do Milah, but Esav was very red. And red is one of the things, red is like yellow also. When the skin is very red, they're worried that something's wrong medically, and therefore we don't do a bris if the baby is overly red. Therefore, it's like to not do Milah. Then the Medrash says, this is the really fascinating part of it, says that the Medrash says what happened
Knew it
after,
all, or didn't do it on the 8th day?
Didn't do it on the 8th day. Then once he realized that this was just his complexion, he should have done Milah, but he said, you know what, once I didn't do it on the 8th day, once I got Milah on the 8th day, and I missed the 8th day. Yishmael got Milah when he was 13. So I'm going to wait till he said I'm not going to do Milah, and I'm going to wait until he's 13. He turned 13, and Esav said I'm out. I'm not interested in the Milah. So according to this medrash, the Vasakanim are bringing Esav never had a bris milah. Very, very interesting. Now, besides for that point of it, that is interesting, machlekes midrash whether or not Esav had a bris milah, what's also, I think, fascinating about this medrash, and the Klichemda asked us, what was Yitzchak thinking? I mean, there's a mitzvah on the faith. It's one of the basic things you can understand. You missed the 8th day, you do it later. Like, what's it like, oh no, I'm going to wait for when he's 13. So Klichemda has a whole cheshbon, a whole complete cheshbon, why Kaidim at the Torah, he was different, and he was now putter, and whatever. But I'm just bringing out the point to something that I mentioned the last time, that it is fascinating. In Kol Tarkula, there is no clear mucker that there is a mitzvah on the father to do
He was red until he was 13?
No, Yaakov's calling me to stop. No, it's still going. Okay. What? No. The Rebbe says he was red. He was red the whole life, but eventually Yitzchak realized that's just how he is.
Because the mitzvah Milah, the mitzvah to do them the 8th day, but then there's a mitzvah that's not as they should do Milah.
That's what we're discussing right now. What is? That is what we're discussing, right? That's the kasha. What was this thinking 30 days later? So do Milah. Every father, no, right? If the kid's in the ICU, you do Milah, whenever you get a chance, right?
Just said that exactly.
What's it called? So you do Milah. Everyone knows that. Except everyone knows that, but it's not so clear in the Torah that thing is true. And even the Minchas Chinuch who says that it's clear in the Paiskin that way, struggles to find even a Gemara that's mavur that there's a mitzvah of the Av to do Milah after the 8th day. So it's not even clear in Chazal. Forget that it's not clear in Psukim, it's not clear in Chazal. And here we have a Medrash saying that Yitzchak Taka didn't do it. Yitzchak said, once I missed day 8, I'm done, I'm out. I'm just going to let him do it once he's 13, which is pretty mind-boggling to me. Okay, but that was one thing, just to catch up.
Where do we get that we continue doing Milah?
That's an excellent question. It's not so clear. Okay. It's very not clear. Okay. And the Minchas Chinuch, like very complicated Kashmonis to prove it from Gemara is that Gemara is clearly Chazal held that way. But where's like the Makkah in the Torah is not so clear that a father is supposed to do Milah. Halach, that's what we do. No one's saying that. It's more than just because you can't just say Minhag Yisrael about this. We're saying the mitzvah of Milah is on the father until it has to be more than that. Meaning some things you just say are Minhag, but like the father makes a bracha with not just based on Minhag. He's making a bracha. He's machuyah. What?
And the kid does not have to redo it.
Right. The kid, we don't have to do a couple of
This is not on the person himself.
That the mitzvah on the father is not only the Torah just says on the father do it on the 8th day. There is no pasuk in the Torah that says, and if you miss the 8th day, you can do it again. Do it at a later point in time.
The mitzvah is only on the father, not on the father.
The mitzvah until 13 is on the father. Then at 13 it switches to the son. But the question is between day 8 and age 13. Everyone knows the father does it. If the kid is sick for a year or 2 years, the father will make a bris milah and the father will do it. But where's the makkah for that is not clear. And this medrash seems to hold that Yitzchak held it's Yitaka Shouldn't. And that's it. Okay, that was just wrapping up, closing up some loose ends. Now, continuing in the Minchas Chinuch, where we were up to. So he has a discussion. He basically brings that there are a bunch of cases in the Gemara where we have a concept called a tafas dam bris. The Milah, you weren't yet to the Milah. Either you do it before the 8th day, you do it Milah. There's a bunch of cases that halacha l'maisa, how we paskin is that the milah is not a good milah, and rather there's a concept of what we call a tafas dam bris, which is essentially making a prick and taking some bleed, and that becomes the chetz of the dam bris, which is like an interesting concept. Like, I mean, it's not. Is that the Maisa HaMitzvah? Like, you missed lulav the entire sukkah, so a week later, like, take a branch and and shake it around a little bit. Like, take any branch from any tree. It's like weird. Like, what is this? Where is this concept? So he questions really: is it deraisa, or is it maybe just some takonim derabanan, like some sort of zecher to bris? Is the question of the Minchas Chinuch. So he says there's a whole back and forth in the poskim is a tafas dam bris doicha Shabbos or not. And the poskim say, no one says because it's only a derabbanan, it's not doicha Shabbos. They all seem to relate to it that it's a real mitzvahs milah and it potentially has a corrective doicha Shabbos. Again, let's say you did a kid, the 8th day is on Shabbos.
It's the Rabbanan's version of.
But the Rabbanan would never give you something to do a ma'isa of bittul Shabbos.
No, but it's the Rabbanan's version of saying that this is. Actual
like a backup for bris, yeah.
It's not even a backup. They're saying that this is the version of it, and so they're saying that this is what we hold is the version of that. It's of a deraisa. They're saying that this is what the deraisa is. It's not a backup.
You're saying it is a deraisa.
Yeah,
that's his question. The question is
I'm saying that's what I'm saying. You explain that as a Rabbanan, or it's the Rabbanan saying, no, this is the deraisa.
That is exactly the Minchas Chinuch's question. Is it a new derabanan that the Rabbanan just said, when you miss bris, you miss bris completely? Fine. We're going to tell you, derabanan, we think that das Torah, we think the good thing to do is, derabanan, we're going to make a mitzvah to, it wouldn't be doicha Shabbos then. But if they're telling you, no, someone who misses bris, the way he's mekayim his mitzvah's bris, so then it's shaykh to be doicha Shabbos, and then you can have, it makes sense to have a discussion.
Got it.
Okay, Lemaisa though, he brings that the Shittas Harambam though is that a ger that's Nisgayer, one of the things that if he has a bris milah already, but it was performed, it was just a regular medical bris done in the hospital, and he's Magayer, he needs a tafas dam bris. We discussed this at length, those of you here Shavuos, we talked about this a lot, and he needs a tafas dam bris, which is not such a big deal. The big deal for a ger is that he needs it in front of the bezin. That's the uncomfortable thing. What?
You wouldn't do Shabbos either, just like a cotton who missed the 8th day.
You wouldn't. We don't do it Shabbos at the end of the day.
Only when you would do a Shabbos is the cotton on the 8th day.
On the 8th day, right? We don't do it. Even a cotton on the 8th day who's doing a tafas dam bris doesn't do it on Shabbos. The discussion the person we're having: what if a cotton? We do not do it on Shabbos. It's a machlekes a poskim, but we don't do it. Even in Elul Mo would not do it on Shabbos, I believe. We're not doing Shabbos. It's only a suffix if in Elul Mo. Suffix or L'Kedusha.
Why you wouldn't in the way you would? Tafa you wouldn't.
Because Hatafa is not. What's the reason the Pais say Lamaisa that Hatafa doesn't bring on Shabbos? I'm sure he brings it. He just says the shach says ataf is like a prick, basically.
Yeah, it's
it's just an additional bloodline. You make a. He doesn't bring the reason what the shach says. He says, "I in the shach some invasive cotton base." Why it's not Deicha Shabbos? But they're talking about it even on an eighth day.
Do your own homework.
That is that. But then he brings the Rambam says a ger that's doing a tavas dam bris, a ger that's doing a tavas bris does not make a bracha. A ger that needs a milah, a full milah, will make a bracha. But a ger that needs a tavas dam bris does not make a bracha. So he says, why not? Why shouldn't if a tavas dam bris is Chazal telling you that's the deraisa for someone who doesn't have a milah? Why should not make the bracha the same way? Anyone who gets a milah does it. So let's say from the Rambam it's a raya that it must only be derabbanan. You could be done on it. What?
How can they be megar with they don't need, isn't part of the process to be megar to do a bris?
When you can, a woman is megar without a bris.
Wait, if a person's not a no, you make a bracha?
A person is nerlin mol. You make a bracha on the tafas dam bris for a nerlin mol. No, the Rambam's saying not like that. The Rambam's saying not like that. The Rambam's saying you do not make a bracha on the
So
tafas.
if you're the person, any case of his no, whether it was from surgery or it was none of that.
Nerlin mol is a complicated. I don't know the sugya of nerlin mol is a complicated sugya because there's different shitas why you do that tafas dam bris. It might be early kavusha, it might be not. It's not. I'm not holding a nerlin mol enough to really to.
Is nerlin mol even a real thing?
Oh, so that is actually a pretty good question. Is nerlin mol a real thing? There are pretty rare cases that are nerlin mol. Many gedolim, Avnei Nezer, and Minchas Chinuch, they wrote that. They wrote. Hold on, remember we're on video, so watch the yeah.
There are also people also born without pinky. It's not like it's a.
Oh,
it's
pinky.
like,
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
you know what I'm saying? Like you're missing.
Yes.
You're missing something. Like it's like.
No, what is that? Nolan mol would mean they have the aver. It just has a milah on it. That's a different thing than not having something.
Missing some skin.
What's the
Saying people miss limbs and they're just missing some skin.
Okay.
I understand
Okay,
what you're
okay.
reading here and not to be overly clinical for that. Another mall, la is right. Everything is missing?
Everything. I don't know much about. I honestly, we would have to like.
Right.
I actually spoke to Moyle. I actually spoke to Moyle today about it, and he was telling me all the thing about the. I'm not really holding in the Messias, and I'm not gonna.
Has he seen?
Do the work. That actually he said he himself has not seen, but he's heard people who have seen. And it was a big shout out to. Hold on, so let me just talk for a second. Hold on. So the Paiskim weighed in on this. Big Paiskim. They said there's no such thing as Nerlin mol anymore nowadays. These people all have something. The Torah is not totally niskala, and therefore there's always something. We don't have the Metzias of Nerlin mol nowadays. There are others, and Rabbi Belsky gave apparently an arichus and trainings and how to show people why. Who said no, it really is Nerlin mol, and the fact that it's not niskala Torah is not a kasha because it will be niskala Torah because it's gonna drop as I get older, and others were of the opinion that there is a concept of a real Nerlin mol.
So maybe there was never.
What?
According to that, maybe there was never.
It's hard to know. The Midrashim talk about like only 10 people in history who were Nerlin mol. It sounds like it was like a super rare thing that took a special intervention in Ashmaim that a person should be Nerlin mol. But Lemaisa, there's a sugya about it, and the Paiskim talk about what to do with a Nerlin mol. Katafas dam bris.
Mr. was the famous Milah in Lakewood, Moses.
Okay.
No.
So I'll get you his number. I'll get his number.
I'm sure people had experience. It doesn't really make them. I'm not sure what it makes that much of a difference nowadays. I don't know the mitzias, like what you're gonna. Because anyway, passing you're supposed to do a tavas dam bris. So, like, what exactly? Maybe if you're doing it on Shabbos, I'm not sure. Maybe that could be an afkamina. We're getting beyond where I was the mitzias on halacha about this stuff. But it is an interesting discussion that place can have. Is there a concept of Nerlin mol at all nowadays? Okay, but then there's one other very important discussion that the Minchas Chinuch has. That gets into something that Daniel brought up, mentioned the other week. They were having a little bit of a discussion about, which is how you deal with shlichus by Milah. The idea is, I tell you first, he starts coming from an interesting angle, but he comes from a Rambam. The Rambam is of the opinion the Gemara darshans that a guy cannot do Milah. It's a drasha on the Gemara. It's not just svar. Of course, the guy can't do Milah. It's a drasha. A shaila where the drasha is from. Is it from Himel from another place? Whatever it is, we pass on that drasha. A guy cannot do Milah. However, the Rambam says that if a guy does do Milah, but once he does Milah, you don't have to do Milah a second time. Just presumably excluding that you don't have to do a tafas dam bris. That's the lashon the Rambam means to say. There's no, once the guy did it, that's it. It's over. It's finished. The Minchas Chinuch is of the opinion that what this Rambam means is that the Rambam means that it's only lechachila that we darshan a guy can't do Milah. But b'diavad, if he did it, then all right, it's good, and you don't. And that's it. It's only a din lechachila that you do not have to do Milah. That is the Minchas Chinuch's opinion. The Rambam, we'll get to maybe at the end. We'll get to the opinion of how the Shagazari learns the Rambam. But that's the Minchas Chinuch opinion. So he asked the following question as follows. He says that there is a Yeduadik Rosh. The Rosh has in the Hilchos Kisei Adam. The Rosh brings from Paiskim that when someone steals a mitzvah from someone else, he has to pay him. There's a kanas that he pays him. Asar zehuvim, 10 gold coins. He's supposed to pay someone if someone steps in and the vultures a mitzvah from someone else. Like Kisei Adam is the example. I don't know.
It's a Gemara about cow. There's a Tyson
Right.
over there.
This is
He's still throwing over the dirt over the
Kisei Adam. Kisei Adam is where it comes. Right. Okay, so now the Rosh is a question like this: what if the person who was supposed to do the mitzvah already gave it b'shlichus to someone else? So Eri wasn't doing it himself. He already pointed someone else to do it for him, and then you stepped in and vultured the mitzvah. What's the story with that? And the case the Rosh discusses it by is by the father's mitzvah of Milah. So the father says, if the father is about to do Milah, someone steps in and does the Milah. There's a famous story with Moshe Shapiro that he was once Adabres. That doesn't make sense whether he was Sanduk. Maybe, who knows with him? He was a man who could do incredible things. But okay, I don't know if he was Sanduk. Let's just say he was standing there and he was watching this father. He was going to do, because of the shach we're about to get to, he was going to do Milah on his own. And he learned how to do it, whatever. Yeah, okay. So he starts. So Ramesh was watching him, and he immediately grabbed the knife from the guy, stepped in, did the Milah himself, and told the guy to never get near a child with a knife ever again. So here you have. That was a story where it was a good thing he vultured, and I doubt they content him. But anyway, we don't do knesses anymore nowadays. But but let's say the Av was really going to do it, then someone stepped in. So the Rosh Paskins, he has to pay this knas. However, if the Av gave it already over to somebody else, it was Nasal Acher, then he does not have to. And then someone steps in and steals the mitzvah from the shliach, from the moil, then you do not have to pay the knas.
I don't imagine the Russia would have to pay knas in that scenario because he's a kid.
I understand, right? Yeah, I doubt you.
Grief later.
Right. Yes. Now, so the Shach comes along, and the Shach says, based on this Rosh, very famous saying of the Shach, he says he doesn't understand. He sees everybody, the fathers are just giving it over to a moil, they're chabed a moil in bris. He says, I see from this Rosh, you're not supposed to do that. Because he's saying, why is the Rosh saying the guy who steps in doesn't have to pay if he gave it over to a shliach? If that's standard practice, then why is the Rosh saying it? I'll get a little deeper into the explanation of how the Shach is understanding the Rosh. And the Shach says, as long as a father is physically able to, a father should be learning how to do Milah on himself. And he sees from this Rosh, it's not the right thing to appoint a moil to do mitzvah Milah.
Why does he need
What?
Why not just mitzvah by Yisro Mishluch? Why does he need this?
Why out mitzvah by Yisro Mishluch? I don't know if there would be, if people don't know how to do it, I don't know if there would be enough to tell them that like you really shouldn't be giving over. But yeah, out mitzvah Yisro Mishluch. I don't know if that would be much more than that. What?
One of the sons, the youngest son of this person I just spoke to you about, he's also a male, right?
Yeah.
But he was a new models, and I remember I was by a bris of his son on Shabbos,
Yeah.
and there was a different male there with him
All right.
to do it. So.
All right. Yeah, it's not.
So
We don't do the
don't.
shach.
They don't.
Right. We don't. Obviously, Minagoyel is not to go to the shach, but that's the shach's opinion. So what's the pshat? How's the shach understanding? So there's three basic pshatim. Two are pshatim in the shach, and one is a pshat in the Rosh B'chlal. The shach understands that the Ksais explains the shach. The Ksais says that he holds the mitzvah of Milas Ha'av, the different categories by mitzvahs. There's the standard mitzvahs that where a person, there's a certain ma'isa a person is supposed to be doing. I shouldn't say standard mitzvahs when it comes to mitzvahs, not, but there's classic cases of like shlichus, let's say kedushin, right? A person it has to be you who are mekadosh as isha if you want to be married to her, but you can make a shliach do it for you, to create the ma'isa kedushin on your behalf. That's classic shlichus. Then there are mitzvahs that are considered ma'asim shebegufa. That's like shaking a lulav, putting on tefillin. You can't make a shliach to do it for you. There's Taisus Rid that explains it, that it's an act that your body needs to be involved in. You can't make shlichus cannot replace that, and therefore you can't just make a shliach. Imagine if you could make a shliach to put on tefillin every morning for you. It would be great. Man, it would be not the money that would be flying back and forth would be pretty epic. But Maisa, that we don't do that, right? And the understanding is Maisa Shabagufa, your guf has to do it. So the Ketzos understands that the Shach holds that the mitzvah ha'av to do Milah is like a Maisa Shabagufa, that his physical body needs to be doing this Milah. And the Milah Shlichus doesn't work. There's no such thing as Shlichus by
New definition for Shabbos guy, right?
Milah. For Shabbos.
For Shabbos guy.
What do you mean for the?
I'm making him Mashiach for Shabbos.
To do Shabbos. Okay.
New definition.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one understanding in the opinion of the Shach, that Shlichus B'chlal doesn't work. The place here, Rabbi Eivshitz understands in the Shach. He says no. He says Avada Shlichus does work. But the problem is, he says what the Shach is saying is that people are being mechaber people and not making him a shliach. Right? They're appointing a moil, but they're not making him a shliach. They're just saying bekovad. You call up at the bris, okay? You imagine you call up with the moil at the bris, and you never made him a shliach for you. You just said I'm mechaber you as it. That's what the rush means. That's what the person's doing. The person just was mechaber a person with Milah, but didn't actually make him a shliach. When you appoint a moil to be the moil at the bris, you have to make him your shliach. He's saying. So that's how he understands what the Shach is saying, which obviously softens on a lot the chiddush of the Shach. But he's saying, but the point is, he's saying that it works through shlichus. So again, according to the Ketzos, shlichus can't even work. It's a ma'aser shebegufa. Shlichus does not work by Milah when the father has someone else do it. And according to the place, shlichus can work. Just you need shlichus. And he's saying, and what the Shach and the Rosh Hashanah is that people aren't making a shliach; they're just being mechabit someone else with it. And if we just mechabit someone else with it, then you're not really doing what you're doing correctly. And the Rosh is saying someone else then can vulture the mitzvah from the guy, and there's no repercussions. The third mahalach in the Rosh is.
People, like the Milah Shliach, we say that before the bris.
You are supposed to make the Milah shliach. It's probably
Like Miles.
A good moil will tell you, make me your shliach before, yeah.
A good moil.
Based on this. Now, the Tuashar says the opposite. The Tuashar says no. His understanding in the Rosh is that what the Rosh is saying is that fakert is that a person is making the guy a shliach, but he's making him a shliach begeder. I want to go to the football game. I got to go to the game today. I have tickets, and it happens to be the Milah. Is inconveniently fell out on the 8th day, and so on that day, and so he gives it over to someone else as a shliach. That's what the Rosh is saying. So then you already gave up your right to the mitzvah. You just appointed a guy to fill your place. He says, Avad, if you're mechabit someone as the mitzvah and you want and derech covered, you're giving it over to someone else. He says that's perfectly fine. There's no issue with that at all, and the Rosh would have no issue with that. And of course, fakir, then someone else steals it. He's stealing the cover that you had a right to give to someone else. That would be. That would be an issue. Okay,
then you should have to pay that person, not you necessarily, but you should have to pay somebody. According to that, he should have to pay somebody.
But no, the point is more, it's your mitzvah. Once you gave it over to someone with Taras Kavod, so you care about this. You care about the Kavod, now we vultured that from that ability to give this mitzvah to someone else.
Then he should have to pay.
But there's no payment for taking away someone's Kavod. There's a payment for taking away your mitzvah. You're being Mekayim your mitzvah by having this guy do it. That you're getting a kiyum mitzvah, and you're also doing it derech kavod. He's just saying that when you give it over to just get it off your shoulder.
He's not getting a mitzvah for doing the Milah if I'm getting it over to him?
No, he has no mitzvah. Maybe the mitzvah I'll call Yisrael, but probably that might be a good question. But the mitzvah I'll call Yisrael, he's no better than the other guy. The other guy can. Meaning, there's two mitzvahs. There's the mitzvah on the father, and then there's the mitzvah I'll call Yisrael. The mitzvah I'll call Yisrael, he's no better than the other guy who steps in. And the mitzvah of the father, he's saying he's not necessarily, the father's the one who has that mitzvah. The father's could be mechabed someone with it, so he cares about it. So now he gets to do it.
So wait, but what's the difference between that and this? There's the same mitzvah teaching your son how to learn.
Yeah.
Teaching your son diary.
All right.
So that you're saying all the Rebbeim were teaching us?
Every mitzvah is different. There's some mitzvahs where shlichus does, whatever.
It's the same exact thing.
No, it's not the same. This is a mitzvah of Milah, and that's a mitzvah of Talmud Torah in your bone.
Talmud Torah, but Talmud Torah is upon the father.
I understand, but every mitzvah is going to have as far as this discussion, are you supposed to be doing it yourself? Can you make shliach or not? Every mitzvah is going to be in a different category. You have to done each one. What?
A Rebbe is considered the same thing. He's a shliach.
Okay, we'll talk about Talmud Torah a different time. It's not part of this discussion right now as far as Milah is concerned. So those are the three opinions. So comes along Minchas Chinuch and he asks the following question. He says he doesn't understand. Again, let's get back to the point. The Rambam, according to Minchas Chinuch's opinion, holds that the Gemara makes a drasha to pasul a guy that a guy can't do Milah lichatchila. But the other Milah is a good Milah. Lichatchila can't do Milah. In fact, he says I don't understand. I'll add it the way I would say the kasha. Like the shach, anyway, lichatchila, you're not supposed to be giving the mitzvah over to someone else. Lichatchila, there's no din shlichus, right? So there's no din there's no din really to give it over lichatchila to someone else, right? And Elamai, he says, what are you going to say? We're talking about the kid himself is doing his own milah. He's already an adult, and he's giving you over to a guy. He l'chari shlichus then, because you want to say the father's mitzvah is a ma'aser gufo, but the kid's mitzvah is different. But now the kid should need shlichus for his mitzvah. That's number one. And he says, and if you're going to go with the places shot with the B'nai and I've shot, so that shlichus does work. But you just have to make sure you're doing the shlichus. You have to make sure you're actually making the guy a shliach and not just giving him a derech kavod. So again, then you need shlichus. There's no shlichus for a guy. So once there's no shlichus for a guy, of course a guy can't do milah l'chachila.
Isn't the shlichus just for the mitzvah aspect, not for the fact that it was a good meal or not?
So but that's not the point. The Rambam's saying that it's a good milah either way.
Is he supposed to be doing the meal on himself? Or he has
So maybe he does. So maybe he's supposed to. So that's I think the weak point here. That's a good point. We'll get to that in 1 second. He's assuming, and he speaks out the Minchas Chinuch, that in this world, when you turn 13, then you're either you're supposed to do it yourself, which obviously that would be weird, or you're making shlichus to someone else. And even the shach would agree that shlichus works in that case, but you do need shlichus. Meaning he never goes as far as, at least in these shitas, as far as you're going, which I think is a good sign. Because there's three categories here. There's mitzvah ma'aser shebegufo that you can't even make a shliach. There's mitzvahs, like I said, kedushin, that you can make a shliach. But then there's also mitzvahs that you don't even need a din shlichus on. Like there's mitzvahs that are just about the result happening. Peruvu we just had recently, we discussed it. Now we're not going to get into having someone be your shliach for Peruvu. That would obviously, not a good example. But as far as the lumdus is concerned, the lumdus is still, it's a mitzvah where the result is what you're trying to get to. It could be, it's a chiddush, but it could be that the mitzvah that's on the son is just the result of being gemalt. And therefore, he doesn't need a shliach to do it. Anybody can do it. Anyone can do it for him. And maybe even a guy could do it if not for the drasha. That tells you the chachila not. That I think is the correct answer for the Minchas Chinuch's objection. But speaking at his kasha, he's saying that if you go like the place and you go like the shach, that either you need shlichus or shlichus doesn't work, then what do we need a drasha to pass a guy l'chachila from doing milah? If you go, he holds like the Tuashur, who's saying that derech kavod is fakir is the good and the best way to do it. He holds the Tuashur as saying, it sounds like he holds it. The Tuashur is saying that you don't need shlichus, and if you don't need shlichus, then he says that it's a good teretz. Why then you don't need shlichus? So maybe a guy could even do l'chachila. Kamashla, no, a guy since he is not b'chlal milah, a guy cannot do it at least l'chachila, but b'diavad it would work. That's a shtickle from the Minchas Chinuch, a very nice piece. Just 2 points to close off on this. One thing is the nafkamina we mentioned the last time that I said about the conversation we had with Daniel the last time, that it could be then by B'nai Keturah they can do milah, right? Because B'nai Keturah, if you don't need shlichus, and right, I said B'nai Keturah they're b'chlal milah, so they're not dismayed from the drash, at least according to the Rambam. And we discussed, is it maybe only misafik now the b'chuyev or not? Okay, we've gone through this Baruch the last time. We know Yehuda's opinion about the whole discussion, so we'll leave it out. Yeah.
If B'nai Keturah became gay, would they need a secondary Milah al Yisrael? Or
They probably would, because they don't have the priya anyway. They're not mechuyev in priya, we discussed, and I would think so.
Even if they did that, the chiyur with ger is very clear.
But it's only milah when you did. If you did a milah,
why should they be any different than a
there's a discussion about this.
Yeah, but a person with ger.
No, but they had a mitzvah milah already. They had milas avram avinu already.
But they're not the new person. Gershon is guy.
Yeah, okay.
So that's going to involve.
Maybe. I think you're right that they would need. Well, they need priya if they didn't have it, and. Yeah. So anyway, it's possible that the Arab doctor in the hospital in Israel does milah on Israel. You're good to go like that. There's one other thing. I was just say the Shakas Aryeh Mahalach, he learns Rambam completely differently than the Minchas Chinuch. Says it's not a l'chachila b'diavad. Says all the Rambam saying you don't need another Milah. Says there's a concept called me'uva sheni acholiskoin. Meaning hatafas dam bris is when there's something that wasn't someone who's mechuyev Milah. Let's say like a ger is guy and has a Milah already. So he was never mechuyev Milah. So he does hatafas dam bris now in order to because he was never mechuyev in it and had it done. But somebody who was mechuyev in Milah and had a guy do it, so it's me'uva sheni acholiskoin. He just did a bad Milah. There's no ticket for it. There is no hatafas dam bris on such a thing. There's no point in doing anything else. You messed up. You had one opportunity and you messed it up. You didn't shake your rule. You missed circuits and didn't shake your rule. Basically, you're stuck. There's nothing else to do. Only by people who were never mechuyev now become mechuyev and the milah is not an option physically. So then there's a concept of doing some sort of tikkun of a tafas dam bris. But someone who had a chiyuv and messed it up by having a guy do it, there's just nothing.
It's a tikkun, or it's more of like a kid that was born without, what's the saying? Kid was born.
No,
No, like maybe it's like another mo aspect where you're a ger and you're no, so you need a compass down.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Not that you missed.
But the point is, you didn't have a chiyuv that you messed up. You didn't mess anything up. You just never had a chiyuv. But someone who had a chiyuv and messed up doesn't.